talking instead of addressing.
That's ungodly.
So that would be an abdicator.
That's an she doesn't
you just don't deal with the issues and just leave it and run away from it.
But they're trying, see, that's their way of trying to get attention. And that's why you don't want to teach the people in your circle of interaction to be abdicators, because you teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. So when you cater to that and say, well, what's wrong with you? Please tell me what's wrong with you. What you're teaching them is that that's how to get my attention. So I just ignore it, you know.
Now, can you say that again, though? That was really important.
You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. So when you tolerate that behavior, when you tolerate verbally abusive husbands or whatever, what you're saying is it's okay. Or if you tolerate people who borrow your money and they don't pay you back and you just, well, I wish they would, rather than confronting them and say, oh, you may have forgotten, but the money is due. I always give a person the benefit of the doubt, because I'm totally convinced that most of the people who offend us or whatever, they don't know it, really. So that's why I don't assume that somebody had ill will towards me just because they offended me. That is so important, because we have people today who are emotionally distant from each other just because of one little comment or something and the person didn't even know, and that's not fair.
And then the fourth would be the collaborator.
The collaborator who says, I care about you, but I care about me. That's win-win, like the daughters of Zelophehad. I love the Bible. With that story in Numbers 27 where they went before Moses and said, you know, the promised land has been divvied up and we're out in the cold because we don't have a father, brother, husbands. We have no men in our lives. And they said, give us the same inheritance that our uncles would have gotten. And Moses went to God, and God said, cool. Okay, that's my word.
Yeah. He could have said cool.
Yeah. He said, surely. He said, they're right.
Well, what I love, too, is that after you talk about the conflict management styles, and you're kind of going, oh, that's me.
Could all of us have a little bit of...
parts of it are us.
Yes.
Then you give skills on how to effectively express your needs and yourself. And I think the biggest thing, and I actually have it highlighted in pink, and all the way down the page on the I statement, which I thought was an amazing tool for anybody to learn on how to deal with conflict.
And that's a method by which you put the issue on the table very specifically in setting the boundaries and explaining how you feel. So the I statement, the model is, when you do blank and you describe the behavior that you find problematic, I feel blank. And I would prefer if you are, like for you to. So let me give you an example, because it doesn't always work. And when people say it doesn't work, but you've obeyed God and you've gotten it on the table. My husband and I were on a trip and he was speeding, you know, he was a typical man. And I said, you know, when you speed like that, see, I'm not accusing, like, I can't believe you're speeding. When you speed, I feel that you don't regard my safety. See, I feel that you're not regarding my safety. I would appreciate if you would slow down.
Now, what do you do when he reloads the dishes you've loaded in the dishwasher?
Oh. Is that a hypothetical situation or that's a real situation?
I know the way Moira said it. You're like,
Moira said something that...
Darnell, this is Deborah's husband. Darnell actually reloads her loaded dishes in the dishwasher. Is that not a little...
No, you know what? You learn to deal with people according to knowledge. Keep this in mind. You understand that this is who they are. He needs order. I don't load them very well. I'm just trying to get the door closed.
With your leg pushing against it.
Get it closed. You know, he watched all the little forks lined up like little soldiers. I'm like, that is just too much time. And so I'm thinking, this is who he is. He needs order. I need accomplishment. I just need to get him done. He needs order. So I'll say, you know, that's who he is. You can see, we got to stop addressing things like a bee when it's just a gnat.
So, but what's good, I think, about that is you're expressing the issue, and then it's I feel. So it's not like I know and these absolutes. It's like, this is how I feel about the situation.
And it has nothing to do with your character. You don't attack character.
Yes, so you're not saying you're doing this.
You're not a bad
You're
person.
doing this to me.
Yes.
See, that's really good, because I think we tend in confronting to say, you're doing this to me. This is how you, versus to say, oh, I feel this way. Now, it could be perceived differently. Maybe you didn't realize it, and I prefer.
Because no one can argue with how you feel. You know, that's not a conflict. This is how I feel. These are my feelings. And I'm owning the problem. You see, so sometimes you share a problem with people. Let's say you all had an issue among you. But
speaking of which, Bridget, we're going to actually do a little confrontation with Bridget.
But suppose that you come to her and you're like, you know, Maggie and Moira. But you know, so you got to own the issue. You got to say, this is how I feel about it as well.
And then when you say, and I prefer you, I think that's good, because that gives then an option, like another behavior or another thing to do, versus just leaving it. And they're like, well, then what do I do about that?
Absolutely. You got to be clear on what you want. That's what boundaries are all about as well. This is the behavior, but this is how I'd like to be treated.
And after, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say the thing that I find so interesting about that is that well, at least when I was in school, they taught us about I statements. They told us, in order to avoid conflict, make I statements. And it's so funny how, as we get older and more people come into our lives, we're like, we forget about that, you know? We're like, I statements don't work, you know? But it causes so much strife.
Oh, yes. But
we don't want to sound
but
like
you don't want to avoid
there.
conflict.
Yeah.
You see, conflict is good. It's inevitable. It's good. We're not all carbon copies. I always say conflict is a tool of growth. Because I get a new perspective. And so if I'm secure enough, and I've been on the show to talk about being insecure, because a lot of times people are so insecure they can't stand another opinion because they take it as a rejection, not only of their opinion, but of their entire person. So I try to practice just being secure enough to hear you. So I often like to use the term, I hear you, especially in a conflict, because half the conflict in resolving it is for the person to know that he's been understood. And that's one of the key rules, is to seek first to understand. So if you're telling me your version of the problem or whatever, and I say, I hear you. Did I just say I agree with you? No, I hear you.
Yeah. You know what's funny? They do that in customer service all the time. We've all been there when we've been in whatever store and that person in front of us is screaming their head off and the manager's like, I understand, and you can tell, like, immediately the person's guard goes down because now they feel
they've
like
been heard.
Exactly.
But I think it's amazing that conflict is necessary. In the book, you say it takes risk and it's necessary for growth.
Absolutely.
Like you actually, so I was like, it is risk taking because it is risky to go out and say, Maggie, you're doing something. No, but I mean, it really does. And like your heart starts beating because you're like, conflict. And
but what's the risk? Think about it. If you peel that onion, what do you fear? Alienation
and rejection.
They may not, and that's the greatest fear. Alienation and rejection. Nobody wants to be alone. Right. I mean, that's why they punish prisoners by putting them in prison. And in prison, they punish them by putting them in isolation. We so need each other. We so need interaction with other people that we'll go to great lengths to make sure that we don't threaten that.
And you say the key is, sorry, Moira, and you say the key is after the confrontations to forgive and just
to release it. Release it. And you know what point I want to make is that forgiveness is just a decision. We think we need the emotion of it before we can just resume the relationship. No, I just take great joy in just going towards a person that I still don't feel that great towards, because I know that emotions follow behavior. If I behave, eventually I'll feel. If I behave, eventually I'll feel. I believe that's why that Jesus said, love your enemies, bless those that curse you. See, these are all things you do. Pray for those who despitefully use you. You see, you just do something. So if you're in conflict with somebody today, find something nice to do for that person or to say to that person.
And in bold print, you say, the person who is more spiritually mature is always the one to initiate the reconciliation.
I was like, wow.
And that's often the person who's been offended.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But why don't we do it? You see, that's why I think if we live in the scriptures, I read that. I was in conflict with somebody the other day. In fact, all my 6 brothers. And